Hello, my name is J. Lauren Norris, Attitude Engineer from Tell It Like It Is. I want to talk to you about 7 powerful attitudes to live a more excellent life. On this CD, we're going to cover 7 different attitudes and the impact that they'll have on your workplace, your family relationships, and even the community around you. The 7 attitudes that I want to talk about are the attitude of cooperation, the attitude of excellence, the attitude of expectation, the attitude of appreciation, the attitude of insuperable, the attitude of communication, and the attitude of identity. But before I get into what those 7 attitudes are and the impact that you'll see in your community, in your relationships, in your work environment, whether you are the employer or the employee, whether you're a mentor or a mentee, a student or a teacher, before we talk about those things, I want to talk first about attitude a little more specifically in how it relates to everyday life and the circumstances that you find yourself in. As an example, you might hear someone say, well, under the circumstances, my life is fine. Well, under the circumstances, I think I'll make it or I'll get by. Or under the circumstances, I have a right to complain. Well, what are they talking about under the circumstances? Generally speaking, we're talking about a set of facts. It may be that taxes are too high, unemployment rate is too high, I can't get a job, or it may be I was born in a family that just didn't have enough money, I don't have the right kind of education, my employment opportunities aren't there, I live in the wrong part of the country, I don't have the right background in family or demographics to be able to succeed. And so there are all these excuses. Maybe I was abused as a child or neglected, or maybe all the opportunity that I expected to come about in my life just never came to fruition. So there are a lot of things that we might call circumstances. It might be a car accident that left us in a wheelchair. It might be service in the military that left us disabled or missing limbs. I have no cartilage in my knees, as an example. Now, those are just facts. The question is, at what point do those facts control the outcome of our life? And the answer to that question is when those facts collide with our attitude. So let's think for a moment, exactly what does that mean? Well, here's what the research has told me, all of the books that I've read over the last 25 years about how people think about what it means to communicate, especially in the roles of leadership, to the people around you, and the impact that your thoughts and the things that you believe have on your overall attitude. And then where we see the transition from those thoughts to belief, to attitude, to action, actions repeated become habits, a group of habits together become a behavioral pattern, and the behavioral pattern of you and those around you become the circumstances you find yourself in. So let's walk through that really quick. Now, here's one thing that you need to know. In your mind, those thoughts, some are fleeting thoughts. And by that I mean some of the greatest brain research, Dr. Caroline Leaf, Dr. Daniel Amen, even just regular people who talk about thought, positive mental attitude, whether you're talking about Emil Koo or Jack Canfield, all of these guys will tell you that a new thought in the brain lasts about 37 seconds. Now, if you don't focus on that thought, if you don't write it down, if you don't meditate on it or think more about it, it basically evaporates into nothingness in a very short period of time, and it perhaps will never come into your mind again. But if you take that thought and you focus on it, a good thought could become a brand new brainstorm, a new invention. I mean, new ideas like the iPhone started with a 37-second thought, what Jack Canfield calls the 37-second genius. The iPhone wasn't born in 37 seconds, but the idea was. Let me tell you what else can happen in 37 seconds, though. A thought may enter your mind when you walk past a mirror and go, wow, you're really ugly. Or, wow, you're really fat. Or, look how broke you are. And the minute that thought begins to culminate in your brain and you think about that thing over and over again, it takes on a life of its own. Just like a new invention, the iPod originally replaced CDs and cassettes. Now you can do anything with your iPhone that you could have done with your computer 15 years ago. In fact, most iPhones have more onboard memory than your average PC did 10 years ago. That is a huge revelation when you stop and think about it. Now think about how your brain expands in the same way when you walk past a mirror and you go, what a loser. See, those thoughts are doing the same thing, but what they're doing is creating negative, toxic realities in your own life. And each one of those has the ability to change your health conditions, the way that you view yourself, the way that you talk to people around you. And yes, those thoughts become a belief system. So if you think, for an example, wow, you're really fat and ugly and broke and no one loves you, you begin to think that again and again and again and meditate on what does that mean? Well, if no one loves me, I'll never get a date. If I'm fat and ugly, no one wants to be with me. If I'm broke and unacceptable, then I'm going to be lonely the rest of my life. Now, even if all of that is completely untrue, you're not overweight, you're not hideous to look at, even if you were hideous to look at, there's someone out there who loves you. All of those things, even if they're untrue, begin to shape our belief system, and then we get an attitude based on those things. And so our attitude kind of looks at those elements, facts as we see them, true or not, and says, you know what, based on the way I perceive myself, no one's going to love me anyway, so I'm just going to act any old way I want to. I can say anything to anyone, anywhere, anytime, because what have I got to lose? Nobody loves me anyway. And so this process just continues to germinate in our mind. And then when we realize, hey, nobody loves me, I can say whatever I want to, what tends to happen is that attitude comes out in our speech process, and we have a conversation with someone when they say, you know, I don't know why you're so mean to people. Well, in the back of our heads, what we're saying is, nobody's going to love me anyway. Who cares if I'm mean? So I'll just be as mean as I want to. That way you can't tell me you don't love me and hurt me because I told you first. And so we push people away. We do the same things with a salesperson who's out on a sales call and doesn't believe that they're going to close the deal, walks into the deal with an attitude and says, you know, you probably don't even want to buy this stuff. The price is too high. The product is not any good. But it's my job, and so if you'd buy it, it'd really make me feel better. Well, that's not the way to close a sale. That lack of confidence doesn't do anything for the consumer or the product or the company. And so that's a negative start that's never going to go positive. When you begin to see those actions and those conversations that come from those attitudes, they all originated with a thought. Now, the bad part is when you have those negative thoughts and you think, I'm fat and ugly and unlovable, nobody wants to buy from me, nobody wants to be with me. And then you begin to believe that to such an extent that everything you say, every action that you do comes from that nature in you. Then all of a sudden, all of your attitudes and all of your conversation and all of your actions become what you might call self-defeating or a self-fulfilling prophecy. You sabotage your own conversations and relationships to the point that they just don't have a chance to succeed. And then you follow that up by doing it so consistently that now you've reached a place that you don't even think about it. I remember the conversation after I'd been married to my wife almost 9 years when she sat down and said, I need you to see you the way I do. I don't see you as fat and unlovable. Fat and unlovable. I see you as a gift to me. And when you tell me that you're fat and unlovable, I question my own decision. Now that changed the parameters in my life. That was more than 10 years ago now. And I still look back on that moment and remember how I felt right then. How useless I felt up to that moment and how in that moment I felt completely accepted. It changed the conversation that came out of my mouth. It changed the conversation that went on in my head. It also changed the way I acted. Around her, I was more confident. Now, a group of those actions become habits. And if you have a habit of talking yourself down, destroying your own confidence, demeaning yourself in front of other people, eventually they begin to believe it too. Again, even if it's not true, they can build beliefs on that, build attitudes around that, build actions around that. Those habits just become the natural course of things. Kind of like when you drive home at night and you pull up in the driveway and go, wow, I don't even remember turning on my street. Those subconscious behaviors, just become ingrained in what we do and who we are and what we say. Now, if those thoughts become beliefs, become attitudes, become actions, become behaviors, all of those actions that become habitual behaviors, it's just what we do again and again and again without thinking. Those habits, when they're all added together, become a behavioral pattern. So someone might say, well, he's really a negative guy. Everything that comes out of his mouth it's mean to other people. He doesn't consider other people's feelings. He never has a positive thing to say about the business or about the industry or about even himself or the people that he works with. He's a bad seed. Well, now that group of behaviors has kind of become a label. And what happens? Well, he's the guy who always talks about how you're never going to close the sale. And so he believes that. And so he says that. And so he shows up and he does that. He does what? He doesn't close the sale, ever. And so when the time comes up for a promotion or a job hire or a new opportunity, he's the last one considered. Because of the negative attitude, because of the negative language, because of the negative behavior. And then he says, wow, look at my circumstances. I never close the sale. I never get the promotion. I never get the new job offer. My life is terrible. I must be fat and unlovable and broke. And it becomes that same cycle again. And the more you think about how bad those things are, the more you make them happen. The whole process of attitude engineering is realizing that there are some truths about you, about the people that you work with, about the community at large, that do not require that you have a negative attitude toward them, but that you have an opportunity to change the attitude that you have and realize that that attitude is contagious. I mean, the attitude shows in the words that you speak. It shows in the stories that you tell or the jokes that you tell. It even shows in what you choose to talk about. Is it politics? Is it religion? Is it race? Is it things that are inflammatory in the workplace? Is it things that almost every time you say something to someone, it raises up an ire in them. It causes them to be upset or passionately argue with you? Because the patterns of your speech, and you can just ask yourself, just look in the mirror and ask yourself that question. When I start a conversation with someone, is it positive or is it negative? When I get into a deep conversation with someone on things that I'm passionate about, do I walk away at the end of that conversation feeling like I have made them better or added value to them, or do I feel like I've torn them down? If those two conversations going on in your head can't come together where you say, I walk away from a conversation with someone and I feel like I've added value to their life and made their day more positive, and I feel better for having done it, then you may want to just stop and make note. Begin to make note of the things that you say, the words that constantly come out of your mouth, and just on your own scale of 1 to 10, rate them as positive or negative, 1 being really negative, 10 being really positive. And think about the common phrases that you use. Do you call someone a loser all the time, or do you call somebody a winner? Do you tell someone that there's no hope for having them around, or that they're going to be a great investment in your life? Look for those opportunities to identify the habits that you have and the way that you use them, because they'll express to you the attitudes that you already possess. Realize, too, that attitude is contagious. If you speak to someone with a bad attitude, they're probably going to reflect that bad attitude right back to you. If you walk in the door to an employee or an employer or a peer or a family member or a student or a teacher and you say, man, today is just horrible, it's not going to take long at all before the whole room kind of feels that tension. And of course, it's unlikely that you're going to just say that and then stop there. You're going to give several reasons why today is horrible. And by the time you finish, everybody in the room is going to feel the same way, horrible. Sometimes silence is better than nothing, but if you could say something positive, a good attitude can counter or reverse someone else's bad attitude. So if you're a teacher and a student walks in the room and says, oh, it's just a terrible day today, and you respond to that with, it looks like a beautiful day to me. I mean, all my students are here and everyone is healthy and the sun is shining and we have an easy lesson today, and I might even be able to let you go a little early so you guys can go to lunch or whatever. All of those are opportunities to change someone else's attitude simply by the words and the tone that you speak to them with. Now, how does attitude relate to our communication? We just talked about that. The words that you say, the stories that you tell, the jokes that you tell, how you speak about yourself and speak about others, the influence that you have an opportunity to use, communicating your attitude to others verbally is significant. How does attitude impact leadership? Well, I believe that leadership, as John Maxwell says, is influence. Nothing more and nothing less. So if you influence someone's attitude for the positive versus influence someone's attitude for the negative, you have the opportunity to influence them one way or the other. And that influence, in and of itself, makes you a leader. The question is, will you lead them in your home, in your work, in your school, in your community to be more positive or to be more negative? I can't tell you which way to do that. It's your choice. Attitude is your choice. When a thought comes into your head, what you focus on or don't focus on will make you who you are. And those thoughts will become beliefs, become attitudes, become actions, become behaviors, and will become your circumstances. You have a chance to lead from the thought to the circumstance. And the key place that you have an opportunity to control that is in attitude, because attitude is a choice. Now, how does that impact vision? Tell it like it is focused on those three things: leadership, vision, and communication. And when it comes to vision, how you see you determines everything. How you see others determines how you treat them and how they treat you in response. Will you get influence with someone else because they respect you, they respect your authority, you influence them in a positive way, you make their life better for being around them? Or will you influence them to avoid you because of the negative impact that you have? How you see your past can make all the difference in the world as well. As I stated before, when you look at circumstances, they're really nothing more than a set of facts. And you can look at that set of facts from multiple directions, if you will. You can choose to see the set of facts. I have no cartilage in my knees. I had to leave the Air Force after 5 years with no cartilage in my knees. It was really hard to get on a professional fire department. Woe is me, my life is terrible. I can't continue the career I was trained for. But I do still get to volunteer as a firefighter. It's one of the passions of my life, and I still do it. I just don't have the same expectations and training qualifications and requirements. And if my knees are hurting one day, I don't have to be there because there's 15 other people who show up every time there's a need. Those are facts in my life. And I could either take the attitude that my life is terrible because I have no cartilage in my knees, or I could take the look on life and go, perhaps I just won't die in a fire. So I want you to look at all the facts in every situation and realize that your attitude is about how you see those things. Your attitude can change, and it's indicative of your character, although it's not directly reflective. Someone may have a strong character with deep integrity and great passion for life and a deep love for others, and yet at the same time not be able to control the attitude that they have, and so road rage will rise up. Well, because a person experiences road rage doesn't necessarily mean they don't manage their finances. Just because a person doesn't know how to control their language in a moment of outburst doesn't mean they don't love you. They just haven't been taught those skills yet, perhaps. Now, there can be those times when a really bad character shows really quickly in attitude and conversation, but it's not always the same. Here's the reality. Attitude is a matter of discipline. It is an absolute choice. When a thought comes into your mind, run over that kitten, and the counter thought comes back and says, that is the most ridiculous, cruel thing I've ever heard. I don't know where that thought came from. I love kittens. You have the chance to choose the thought that you're going to live with or not live with, that you're going to destroy or let evaporate, or that you're going to nurture and grow. And the attitude that you have about that thought, how long you possess it, whether it's a good thought or it's a bad thought, whether you take action on it, whether you're motivated by it or inspired by it, that attitude, as you look at that thought, will make all the difference in your life. But it is a discipline. Your attitude can be changed, and changing your attitude can change your circumstances. I'm going to give you one real life example. Recently in my life, in just the last couple of months, There was a big event that I wanted to go to in another state, several states away. And I had, outside of my monthly budget, outside of my regular plan, set aside money to pay for the hotel, to pay for the gas money to drive to the trip, to pay for the tickets to go to the event. I'd already purchased my tickets, reserved the hotel, and the whole thing. And I had all this money set aside. And just about the time that event came up, my daughter had a minor crisis in her own life that required some immediate attention. Well, it turned out that her financial need in that moment of crisis was almost exactly the dollar figure of the money I'd set aside for my event. So I had a choice. Do I, as a good dad, bail my daughter out and take care of her financial need at this moment, using the money that I've set aside at this event? Do I make it or allow it to be a strain on my monthly budget and try to figure out how to rearrange everything else to cover it? Or do I tell my daughter, sorry, I can't help you. I have money set aside, but it's not for you. It's for this other thing. You're out of luck. Now, in the end, I took the money and I took care of my daughter's needs, and I had to cancel the trip. I could look at that and say, woe is me. I really wanted to go on that trip. I had done all of my own diligence. I had set the money aside. It wasn't going to impact my budget. I did it exactly right, exactly the way I was supposed to. And how dare my daughter come back in and expect me to take the money I'd set aside and pay for her? Or I can look at that and say, I had already set aside money from my budget for a specific thing. What that specific thing turned out to be was different than what I thought it was going to be. It wasn't what I planned for it to be. But I'm so glad that I had that money set aside to be able to take care of that need, because normally I would have had to figure out how to shuffle the budget and cover that in another way. So I'm really thankful that that money was there and didn't impact the rest of the budget in any way. Now, the facts didn't change. The money was set aside. It was outside of the regular budget. It had a specific earmark, and I was really excited to go do that thing. Along comes daughter. Daughter needs the money. All the money leaves my little project and goes to her little project, and I'm out of luck, so to speak. The facts are the same any way you slice it and dice it. The choice is in the attitude. Will I be remorseful that I had to give up my project, my trip, my event, in order to bail out my daughter? Or will I be thankful that I had money set aside, earmarked, safe from the budget, for whatever purpose that I was able to put toward her cause? That, my friends, is a choice of attitude. Nothing more and nothing less. I can have a positive attitude or I can have a negative attitude. It doesn't change the facts. But if I have a negative attitude about that, then the circumstances say my daughter robbed me of an opportunity, which immediately begins to cause friction and stress in our relationship. The pity party kicks in. The negative words kick in. The negative thoughts kick in. The woe is me kicks in. And I do all I can to make everybody else feel sorry for me. And that doesn't work in the long term of relationships. On the other hand, if I say, I'm so thankful that I had the money set aside for another project outside of the regular budget, which I normally don't do, and I was able to do this. Now, Dave Ramsey would have said, you're terrible because you should have had 6 months worth of money set aside anyway, and you should have had, $1,000 worth of emergency money, and I'm working on that. I understand that. That's a future goal for mine, but it's not today's reality. Again, that's about attitude. I can have a pity party or I can celebrate. And I choose to celebrate. I choose to celebrate the fact that in this moment, my daughter had a need and I was able to help her out. That's a powerful thing. But when you talk about leadership and vision and communication, which is what Tell It Like It is all about, attitude is the core of all three of those. Now, for the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to express to you some basic information about 7 very powerful attitudes. These attitudes, when you possess the skeleton of them, and then begin to put the meat and bones around the outside of them, in the daily choices that you make, in the conversations that you have, in the words that you speak, you're going to hear some common language, some impactful statements. You're going to hear how these attitudes impact your workplace, your community, your relationships at home, your relationships at school. And you're going to hear some indicative statements, statements that you probably hear in the workplace now, and you think to yourself, wow, I wonder where that came from. So we're going to jump right in. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. You might want to grab a notepad. We're going to go to the next track, and on that track, we're going to jump right in to the attitude of excellence. So I look forward to it. I appreciate you spending time with us, and get ready for some serious stuff because we're going to move really, really fast. 7 attitudes in 30 minutes. Man, that's going to fly.